Welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. I am your host, Emmy Nixon. To my right, that is my co host, Michael Ween. And today we are getting into our Week 7 edition of NFL Power Rank. But before we get into it, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We record Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday each week. A combination of college football, NFL, NBA, and some MLB thrown in as well for good measure. If those things sound interesting to you, then make sure you're subscribed and following us on wherever you get your podcast. So to get into things, Michael, how are you doing, man?
Can you believe it's already week number 7? We are close to the trade deadline. We are close to it being that time of year where it becomes a little bit more important, November and December football. We're not quite halfway through the season. I have some minor changes, but also some major changes, some new teams in my power rankings this week, especially in the latter half at those 8, 9, and 10 spots. I don't know about you and how many changes you made, but we do have a new way of doing these power rankings that we started last week. So, Emmy, before we get into our conversations, as I know we have a lot to get into, why don't you go ahead and remind the people how we are doing that?
Right. Yeah. So last week we introduced a new format that we thought went really well. So we're bringing it back this week, and we're most likely going to be using this format moving forward. And what that is I will be starting out sharing my 10 through 6, and from there, Michael will kind of identify based on his list where we overlap. We'll go through those teams first, and then any remaining teams we want to hit on, we'll do that before we move on to our 5 through 1. And Michael will do the same thing for those teams, and I will identify where we go back and forth, and we'll be kind of explaining why we have the teams where we have them.
Yes. So let's go ahead and get into it. Go ahead and reveal to me who were your 10 through 6 post week 7.
My number 10 spot, that's where I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They fought really hard to hang around with the Baltimore Ravens, a really high-powered offense, as we know, and an impressive performance on the other side from Lamar Jackson. It didn't feel like the Buccaneers were playing particularly bad defense, in my opinion, yet they still gave up 41 points because that's the quality of opponent that they were facing. Now, the positive notes to say first off is that Baker Mayfield is still playing at an extremely high level. At the beginning of that game last night, he kind of struggled, or not struggled, but he wasn't quite as sharp, but he kind of got into the flow of things and really got hot towards the end, but it just wasn't quite enough. I think this Buccaneers team, they're going to be right around, a couple games, like for 2 or 3 games above 500 the rest of the season, in my opinion. I think they're going to be in the playoffs, most likely, as long as they can end up winning this division. And I still think they're a really good team, but I had to end up dropping them this week a little bit. At number 9, this is where I had the Washington Commanders. I, you know, oh, right. I shouldn't give too much explanation right now. Sorry. So number 9, Washington Commanders. Number 8, this is where it gets pretty difficult. But number 8 is where I had number 8 is where I had the Green Bay Packers. I moved them up one spot this week. They were very impressive, and I'll get into why in a little bit. Number 7, I had the Buffalo Bills, and then no. Sorry, I said that wrong. I moved up the Bills this week, and I had the 49ers in that spot. So Bills at 6, Niners at 7. Let me go through that again. So Buccaneers at 10, Commanders at 9, Packers at 8, 49ers at 7, then Bills at 6.
Okay. Surprisingly enough, we do not have a lot of similarities. Not as many as we had last week, as I made some changes to my list this week. The only team that we have overlap here with is the Washington Commanders.
Wow.
And obviously, we can go ahead and talk about them a little bit before we get into my list and kind of where we may or may not defer. Look, the bottom line is, as long as Jaden Daniels is healthy, he's a complete force multiplier for their offense. I love a lot of the things that they do. When I watch offenses in the NFL, I want to know, like, can you do impressive things? And I think they do a lot of impressive things with their scheme. Their offensive line still isn't great, but it hasn't been terrible. And obviously, Jaden Daniels has a skill set which can eliminate a lot of those issues or make up for a lot of those issues up front. What you can say about the Commanders is they're kind of like, I don't know, I forgot who the team was last season, but the teams that they have beaten so far this year, and their 5 wins, they're beating teams that right now have an average win total less than 2. So they're not beating the greatest of teams, but when they play those teams, they are beating them, and they're beating them badly for the most part. I just think as long as Jaden Daniels is healthy and it doesn't seem like that rib injury is anything too significant, they are going to be not only a contender to win the NFC East, but they're going to be a problem in the playoffs. So I have them at number 8. You have them at number 9. Not a huge difference there. Did you want to say anything on the Commanders, or do you want me to go ahead and give you my version of 10 through 6?
Go ahead and give your version. I think the Commanders conversation is about the same as the way we saw them last week when I had them at 10.
Yeah, so I made some changes. From my list last week, the Falcons dropped out, but they would be just outside my top 10. I considered the Seattle Seahawks, as they're starting to get healthier on the defensive side of the football, and they put a beat down on the Falcons this past week. And I just can't in good faith talk about what's going on in San Francisco right now and consider them a Super Bowl contender. So my list looks a lot different than your list. I slotted in the Philadelphia Eagles at number 10 this week. We can get into that conversation if you want. I have the Steelers at number 9, based on what I saw on Sunday night. I have the Commanders at 8. I had the Vikings in the same spot I had them last week. The loss to the Lions didn't really affect my opinion one way or the other. Thought that was a really good loss, as good of a loss as you can have in today's NFL. And then I dropped Houston, I believe it was from 5 to 6. So my 10 through 6 go Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Washington, Minnesota, Houston. So I don't know if you want to pinpoint any conversations you want to have out of that, or if
I think there's some interesting conversations to be had on the Philly and Pittsburgh front. But let's start with Philly. So in terms of where they stand as an offense, what is it that stood out to you in that Giants win? Because obviously, to close last week's show, we talked a little bit about how Nick Sirianni kind of rubbing us the wrong way with some of his antics, but the offense played much better this week. So what did you see?
Well, my whole thing with Philadelphia is I think if Saquon Barkley is healthy, he kind of took over for them on Sunday. He took over the offense. The Giants' long gain of the day was 14 yards, and Barkley had 3 runs alone that were longer than the Giants' longest play on the day. Um, I don't know how many teams in the NFL are going to be able to consistently stand up to stopping Saquon Barkley. And then when A.J. Brown is healthy, Jalen Hurts hit him with one of his best throws of the season, a 41-yard connection with A.J. Brown. And they had some blocking issues early, which kind of concerns me. Jordan Mailata missed the game, so that's an obvious note. Mekhi Becton left early with an injury. Cam Jurgens had his hands full with Dexter Lawrence early on. But the Eagles found a way to work through that. And they just kind of looked a little more buttoned up on the offensive side after another slow start. But that Saquon Barkley X factor is just such a big part to me that these defenses are going to have to account for moving into playoff-like environments in November and December. So I thought Jalen Hurts didn't have his best day, but overall as a unit, I thought they functioned better. And even though I still think Nick Sirianni, to a certain extent, is going through an identity crisis, and I don't believe that they are a Super Bowl bubble team for me right now because of that, I still think they're good enough to be slotted at number 10 as of right now. So it is the Giants, but the Giants have I thought coming into this week, a pretty respectable defense. So I gave the Eagles some respect this week, and we'll see how it works out moving over the next couple weeks. But I think Saquon Barkley is a big component here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on just the Saquon factor being such a big one. Their running game was really, really good. And that Giants defense, for all you want to say about it, they've had some really good performances over the course of the season so far. So for them to be able to run the football the way they did and kind of get Jalen Hurts going with that A.J. Brown connection, it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I consider them for my list. I just couldn't get that Bucs game out of my head. And then, so Pittsburgh.
Yes.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on where you're at with this Russell Wilson, Justin Fields conversation.
Well, in the Pittsburgh Steelers fan community, everyone outside of Mike Tomlin, who is now being reported was made this kind of as a Lone Ranger decision, like it was his decision, and not everybody within the Steelers organization agreed with it, but Mike Tomlin made the decision, and Russell Wilson ended up making him look great after the first quarter. But in the Pittsburgh Steelers fan community, nobody agreed with this decision. Not my dad, not myself, just not anybody that you really talk to within the Pittsburgh Steelers fan community. It's a big fan base, one of the bigger fan bases in the NFL. And if this decision had not gone down like it did Sunday night, where Wilson ends up making Tomlin look really good after the first couple drives, then Tomlin would be under a lot of heat this week. Now, the reason people were worried going into this week about making this move is, number one, you're 4-2, and when you're 4-2 and you're winning football games in the NFL, a league where the margins of victory are so small most of the time, and it's super hard to win games with any quarterback, much less Justin Fields, who's made a lot of steps since he became a Pittsburgh Steeler, but still is limited in some of the things you can do with him. Throwing the football from a pocket passing standpoint, I was worried because, number one, the Steelers' offensive line is really banged up. This is like the fifth unit they're already going to this early on in the season, with Zach Frazier out a couple weeks, who's been their best offensive lineman at the center position. with Troy Faltanu gone, with Broderick Jones struggling at right tackle, although he was a lot better the past couple weeks, with James Daniels going down with the Achilles to end his season. Like, there's just a lot of moving parts. You have a fourth-round rookie right guard starting his second game in his career against a good front in the New York Jets, like Keenan Williams and all those guys. So the running element and the mobility that Fields gives this Steelers offense was a big reason why a lot of people didn't want to see Russ as kind of like a sitting duck back there in the pocket. And people just believe like Justin Fields wasn't turning the ball over. He wasn't doing anything to necessarily lose Pittsburgh football games. So, given all that, people hated the decision. Now, again, this is ultimately what it comes down to. Mike Tomlin is a leader of men. You can criticize him as a football coach, but he's a leader of men, and he knows how to galvanize a locker room. And when he made this decision to go to Russell Wilson, he was saying, just like he said all offseason after the Steelers made the decision to bring Russell Wilson in for virtually nothing, right? From a financial standpoint, he said, you know, we know what Russell Wilson is. Like his ability might deteriorate, but the heart of a champion never goes away. The experience that he has in all these big games, that never goes away. What he has from a mental standpoint, just making checks at the line of scrimmage, knowing the offense, being able to be a leader on the football field, communicating in all different situations, that doesn't go away. So while he's not the same Russell Wilson he was 5 years ago, he's not the Russell Wilson that we were on this podcast advocating very hard to get MVP votes when it just seemed like he couldn't get any MVP votes at all for whatever reason. He showed on Sunday night that he unlocks another element to this Steelers offense. He allows them to open up the offense so much more. He allows them to pass in order to run instead of running in order to pass. And he unlocks George Pickens, which is something that Justin Fields wasn't doing. And I applaud Justin Fields. I don't know, you don't probably follow Pittsburgh football on a daily basis, but he did have a very good quote that showed a lot of growth and a lot of leadership, where he basically said, if there was any question, and I had played good enough, I would probably be starting this week. But Justin Fields admittedly said, like, I could have been better, which I thought was awesome. But look, the first couple drives didn't look good, but the reason I have the Steelers at number 9 is because past 2 weeks, they've scored over 30 points per game with 2 different quarterbacks. They're running the football a lot better. Najee Harris gets stronger as the game goes on. In the fourth quarter this year, he's averaging 4.7 yards per carry. He's been kind of their closer, similar to like how Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and a lot of these other running backs are closers for their respective teams.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that he just runs better when he gets paired with Warren.
Yeah, and Warren's healthy. That's another element to this offense. And I think defensively getting Highsmith back really changes this defense. I think the defense, it might not be the best defense in the NFL, but I just think the Steelers are a complimentary, really good football team, and I think you're seeing maybe similar to what we kind of saw in Tennessee a couple years ago with Arthur Smith, where the offense started slow that season, but then it really kind of took off. And with Russell Wilson, who has everything from an intangible standpoint, even if you want to nitpick his corniness sometimes at the podium, making checks at the line of scrimmage, just being in control of the offense and unlocking the downfield George Pickens element and keeping George Pickens engaged in this Steelers offense is such a big component. This offense cannot operate if George Pickens isn't a part of it. And so I think Pittsburgh not turning the ball over, running the football, playing good defense, creating takeaways. They're second in the NFL right now in turnover differential at +9. I think they're right there. Like I would put right now, I would have probably the Chiefs in their own tier in the AFC. I think there are 3 teams below them that are probably the biggest threats. The Ravens, obviously, the Bills, to maybe a lesser extent, and the Texans, which might be right in between those teams. And then outside of that, like there are some good teams in the AFC, but I would have the Steelers right up there in that next tier just because like veteran coach, good defense, a quarterback who unlocks their downfield passing game, and a run game. I think I put them in the top 10 this week because of that, because of these back-to-back like consistent offensive performances where they've looked really good.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time Pittsburgh scored 30 in back-to-back weeks. Like I'm sure it hasn't been as long as I'm thinking in my head, but like it definitely is a breath of fresh air, I'm sure, for a lot of Steelers fans. So I definitely see where you're coming from on putting them at 9, and I definitely even though I don't have them in my top 10, like I still think they're in that cluster of teams that have a argument to be on the back half of this list.
Yeah. So what other conversations do you want to have in 10 through 6? Because our list deferred a significant amount outside of the Commanders. But you see where I'm coming from on Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and I see where you're coming from with Tampa Bay. Absolutely. I had the Vikings in the same spot I had them last week for a lot of the same reasons.
Yeah, I didn't move them either.
Outside of that, like I think the 49ers still have an argument to be on the list. Absolutely. I think that's an interesting conversation. What's going on in San Francisco? Why don't we just go ahead and address that? And then we can kind of get into maybe 5 through 1 as there are probably some deeper conversations for those teams.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question what transpired Sunday afternoon was pretty ugly, especially at home in your building. That was probably one of the worst games I've seen Brock Purdy play in quite a while, or maybe even just in general. So I have trouble putting too much stock in that part of it. What I do put stock in, though, is the fact that they just keep getting injured everywhere. Their defense is just getting annihilated right now with injuries, and even a little bit on the offensive line as well. And I think that part of it is just taking a toll on the team, just mentally. Like you see Trent Williams kind of lashing out at the end of that game. That doesn't happen on accident. They're clearly very frustrated by how things are going right now. So right now, I think it's yet to be seen how they'll kind of respond to this adversity. Now, like, am I 100% sure they're going to get this thing back on track? No, but I am betting on them to do so, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if a lot of people who have watched the NFL over the past half decade had to put a bet with your hard-earned money on whether or not the 49ers would end up, like, I don't know how you quantify success, but end up, getting to, let's say, the NFC Championship if they are provided good health, I think we would all probably think about making that bet to some extent. Just for me, I think the injuries play a part. Right now, I don't know how you project the Christian McCaffrey situation playing out. I mean, I think he's supposed to come back sometime in mid-November, but we don't know that for sure right now. There's no definitive timeline, to my knowledge, for when he's going to return. And then, like, defensively, key guys are going down with injuries. Hufanga, obviously coming off the injury last year, has been banged up, and he's a really good player. He's a crucial part to their defense. They've got players up front that are going down. Who was the guy last year in the Super Bowl that went down with the
Dre Greenlaw?
Dre Greenlaw went down with the Achilles. They just have so many injuries, and then you add in the fact that, like, George Kittle's been banged up, and now the guy that they just paid and had this long contract standoff with to get back and be a feature part of their offense, and Brandon Ayuk, not only does he tear his ACL, but he tears his MCL, and there might be more damage to his knee, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So it's just like, and up until today, Deebo Samuel, prayers up to him, he was hospitalized with pneumonia. So it's just like they're having some terrible luck right now on the injury and sickness front. The rookie wide receiver a couple months ago was shot in the chest, and now he's playing for them. It's just a crazy situation right now in San Francisco. I think they will, in a couple weeks, we'll probably look up and they'll be right back, for me, closer to number 5 than they are out of my power rankings. But I don't know. It's a weird situation right now. Where I do have some confidence is I don't think their division is anything special. I like the Seahawks. I really do when they are at full health. Geno Smith leads the NFL in passing yards, for whatever that's worth. And Arizona is an interesting team. Obviously, the Rams are probably, we think, maybe looking to kind of trade off some pieces and maybe start a rebuild. We'll see where that goes. But I think the 49ers can definitely, get back into that conversation pretty easily. So I still have confidence. Just for now, I don't know how to assess that situation. Is the long and short of it. And Brock Purdy probably had his worst game that I've seen him play in the NFL on Sunday. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. It's all kind of coming down right now in San Francisco for sure. All right, I think we can move on to our 5 through 1.
Yeah, so we can incorporate my number 6 because my number 6 is Houston. Right. But for 5 through 1, I had Buffalo at 5. I'm high on Green Bay. I was last week. I moved them up this week. I moved them up to number 4. Detroit, Baltimore, and Kansas City right now seems pretty clear to me. Like, that's the cream of the crop right now in the NFL. Those would be my 3, 2, 1 in that order: Lions, Ravens, Chiefs.
Yeah, here's the I think if I were to make this list again, I definitely would move Green Bay up quite a bit higher. I mean, after all, they are my Super Bowl pick. Even though I am technically lower on them at the moment, I do believe in the team. It's just that I still haven't seen them put 4 quarters together, which is the crazy part. Like, it's like Jordan Love still seems to be a little bit erratic in terms of the turnovers. He's got some Brett Favre in him, I think. It's not a horrible thing, but it's also not what you want. Like, he is very turnover prone at times. And I love the offensive line. I love the receiving core. The running game is great. The coaching is great. I think the one question you have on the Packers is just, where is their run defense sit at? You saw it this week. Joe Mixon he didn't run all over them, but he definitely had his way very consistently. And I think that's kind of where I question them. It's just kind of not their front, but their linebacker core. Can they come up and make tackles in the run game?
Yeah, you know, I thought their defense, even though there might be some questions, you know, against the run, they really got after C.J. Stroud
Yeah.
on Sunday. They held him to a career low 86 passing yards. Um, Jordan Love is hot and cold to a certain degree right now, but I think you take that given that his stellar is so stellar that
Yeah.
some of the risk taking, I like a little like risk taking
I
in
do
my
too, honestly.
quarterbacks. Um, I think they have a super deep receiving core, and we've documented that. I think Josh Jacobs contributed in a pretty big way on Sunday. I like that. I just like the makeup of their team, and it's more of a projection towards what I think they're going to end up being come December. Because we mentioned, like, Matt LaFleur, so far in his career, does not lose very much, if at all, in the most important time of the season. That's still kind of what I'm hanging my hat on from a Green Bay standpoint. I think they're going to be right, right in there in that Super Bowl bubble when it matters the most. So I think things are still coming together, but you much rather have them still coming together and beating teams like the Texans, who are also in that Super Bowl contention bubble, in my opinion, than losing these games and having things be a mess.
Yeah.
And I think the coaching factor is very significant in the NFL, and I think you can make an argument that LaFleur is top five in that discussion. So
Right.
I I like where the Packers are at. I think we both do, but I end up having them a little higher than you. What else do we need to address? Um,
Well, I think we've said all that we kind of need to on the Ravens and Lions prior to this week. I think it's kind of the same kind of conversation. Am I right that kind of our opinions are still pretty much the same on those two teams?
oh yeah, it's just like when you look at the Lions right now. I mean, good lord,
Yeah.
um, there are some pretty insane stats out there right now when it pertains to the Detroit Lions. But I mean, Detroit is averaging a league best 40 points per game since week four. So for almost a month now, they're by far the league's best offense. Um, and Jared Goff, in that time span, has been maybe the best quarterback in the NFL. With 7 touchdown passes, no interceptions, and he leads the NFL in passer rating this season. So, or
Yeah. And
in
to
that
me,
time,
this week he's entered the MVP discussion as well.
when Jared Goff is well protected, because we know he's not really um, a super mobile guy. He's more of a pocket passer. Um, he looks like a guy that was supposed to be drafted number one, or he was drafted. Um, and with this run game, and with the secondary that has a lot of young youth injected into it, I think they're going to go out at the trade deadline and try to acquire a pass rusher. Because that's really the one hole you would point to right now, given the Aiden Hutchinson injury. If they do that, man, like you can make an argument, I think, at some point for them being uh, the favorite in the NFC. I actually think they are the favorite in the NFC as of right now. So
I think so
that's
too.
that's pretty self-explanatory. And like Lamar Jackson, like what the hell, man? Like I think he has more touchdown passes than incompletions like the last 2 weeks, which is pretty insane. So
Yeah.
it's just that Ravens team is with Derrick Henry.
Cooking right now.
It's pretty insanity.
Starting to become very high on Todd Monken as a potential head coaching candidate.
Yeah, I mean you
Um,
look at it, their defense uncharacteristically is 26 in the league in points allowed, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter because Derrick Henry had another 100-yard game last night on 15 carries for 170 yards. Um, 4 of the last 5 outings, uh, he's had a 100-yard game, and they're tied for the league in scoring right now. They've won 5 straight games. Lamar Jackson's playing at an MVP level. Now, obviously, people have questions about, does this work in the postseason or in the playoffs against Kansas City? And can you beat them? But right now, like, they're as good as anybody. So they're clearly, I think, the biggest threat to Kansas City right now. Do you agree with that, or would you put?
I 100% agree with that.
Okay.
And you know, even with them being 26th in the league in points allowed, you could argue that they've played 4 top 10 quarterbacks so far
Yeah.
this season. Joe Burrow, Mahomes. You could even throw in Jaden Daniels, and
They played
then
Josh Allen.
Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen. Yeah, there's 5 right there.
Yep. Yeah, they've beaten. I mean, they beat Dak. They beat
Oh, true.
Josh
Yeah.
Allen. Uh, they beat Joe Burrow. They beat Jaden Daniels, and they beat Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, the only the only not top 10 quarterback they played was Gardner Minshew, and they lost. So go
Yeah,
figure.
that's true. Um. So okay. Um. What else do we need to talk about here? Um. We hit on Green Bay. We hit on Baltimore and Detroit. Any thoughts on Kansas City this week?
Yeah, I think we can have a little bit of a conversation on Kansas City.
What?
Am, are we both on the same page? Like, did we both move them out of number 1 this week? I think so I had Detroit at 1 and Kansas City at 2, just because I can't move Baltimore ahead of them until they beat them. Um, and that's kind of how I see it right now. Even though I think Baltimore is just playing better right now. The Chiefs, I mean, nothing they do in the regular season really matters because they're going to find a way to win anyway. And I also think come December they're gonna find it. And things will be fine. It's just that, are they going to be able to get healthy enough? Are they going to be able to get enough um, out of the run game until Isaiah Pacheco comes back? I think that's been a very underrated part of kind of this like slog that they've been in offensively, is Isaiah Pacheco being out. So yeah, I think the Chiefs are still right in the thick of it. I think it's just gonna be about, can the offense give them enough? And with Patrick Mahomes, it's like, yeah, they're gonna give them enough.
I I didn't personally move them out of number 1 because I I've learned my lesson. But
Yeah,
um, I mean, if you look on paper, and this was any other team, the Chiefs are 16th in yards per play. They're 25th in the league in yards per carry. Patrick Mahomes is 23rd in passer rating.
what?
He's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns this year,
What?
and they're 6-0.
What?
So exactly,
I'm doing that McAfee.
they have mastered the art of winning ugly. And if this is truly a list where in part we're projecting for January, I will keep them there. But when we look up in 2 weeks and they've traded for Cooper Kupp, or they've traded for DeAndre Hopkins and they have Pacheco back, like, what is that going to look like? So I don't know. Until someone beats them, they will remain there for me. But if you're gonna move someone to the number 1 spot, I agree with you. I think you move Detroit there, because they're the favorites in the NFC, and they're probably the more well-rounded, like well-oiled machine right now. Because I think that running game, this offensive line, and I kind of like the way Detroit's secondary would match up with Kansas City's weapons. So
Right.
I don't know if those two teams play each other this year, but that could be a Super Bowl preview if it were to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I guess any thoughts on Houston, Buffalo, Minnesota teams we haven't talked about yet?
Um, let's touch on Houston real quick. Does Houston have a penalty problem?
Maybe it might. Um, I didn't really catch how many times they were penalized on Sunday,
Not like a
but
lot, that's for sure.
uh, look, I mean, I don't put too much stock into what happened Sunday. CJ Stroud had the second worst passer rating of his career. Um, they're 0-5 when Stroud doesn't hit at least 82 on that scale. He had a 58.8 passer rating on Sunday, so obviously not a good performance from him. Not what you want, but earlier on in the season, like Josh Allen had a game where he went 9 for 30 passing and looked pretty bad. So it happens in the NFL. Look, I mean, he's with this Houston team. It's important to have that running game, as I mentioned last week, because right now, if you look at where the Texans are protection wise, Stroud's being sacked on 8% of his dropbacks, which ranks 12th in the league, and he's been hit 43 times, which is the 7 most. But you look up and you see Joe Mixon running for 115 yards, and that's where I have confidence in Houston. If he's healthy going into the playoffs, it's like their ability to run the ball and work play action off of that. And then defensively, there are still some questions there, but I have confidence that they'll be good enough on that side of the ball with as much as I think they're going to score on offense when they're fully equipped. Because Nico Collins is obviously out right now, I think. So I moved them down a little bit, but they're still right there. I mean, their ranking really isn't matter to me all that much in this group of teams. It's more about like where we view them kind of in the hierarchy of Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm right there with you on everything you said. I mean, not a lot of stock on how CJ played, and even then, like there was a few drops in there. I
Yeah,
think Tank Dell dropped a touchdown. I think early
yeah,
on in the game. Um,
it happens.
yeah, it definitely happens. You got to give credit to the Green Bay defense. I think this was without Jair Alexander also. Like so,
Yeah,
really good performance from Green Bay's defense. And the thing that I've been impressed with them the most on is just like their blitz packages have been really effective. Just whatever they're doing right now, they gotta keep that going.
yeah. Other news and notes in the NFL. Deshaun Watson goes down with the torn Achilles. Um, there are a bunch of receivers right now that are on the trade block. Um, I heard a rumor earlier, and I have no idea if it's true, but the Vikings are interested in Matthew Stafford. I have no idea if that's true or not, but that would be weird. Um, what else happened? I feel like there's some. Oh, the Jets. What is your thoughts on the Jets right now? That's a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a mess, and I would love to sit here and be like, oh, give it time, blah blah blah. Like Aaron Rodgers, like he's still playing decent, blah blah blah. Like yes, that might be true. Aaron Rodgers isn't playing horrible, but they're not the defense we thought they would be. Number one, they were meant to be like this like top unit that was gonna rush the shit out of the passer. They're not doing that, and then the coverage on the back end, as a
No.
result, has been leaned on far too much because
Yeah.
they haven't been able to rush the passer with Jermaine Johnson going down with his season-ending injury. It's been really costly for them, and they are going to get Hassan Reddick back, but I don't think that's enough either. Um, that team, man, is just I I don't know.
Colin Coward and John Middlecoff on their NFL recap podcast on Sunday night kind of likened it to, well, here's the thing, like you can't plug and play these players. For example, Devontae Adams, you can't trade for him on a Monday and expect him to be like a featured part of your offense on a Sunday. Like it just doesn't work that way in the NFL. And on the Hassan Reddick stuff, like he's a good player for sure. But for so long, it felt like the organization, Woody Johnson, who I think is making most of the decisions, and Joe Douglas, who at this point might be a dead man walking, considering that he's the GM and his contract is up at the end of the season. And I don't know that they're going to give him an extension. I think he's out. I think they're going to have a new GM. And Woody Johnson, I think, has most of the power. He's the owner of the Jets in making these decisions. Like, for so long, it felt like the front office and Reddick and his representation were so far away on a deal that this deal, like, went on significantly. Like, the negotiations went on significantly into the season. He's one of the only guys in, like, the last couple of years that have ended up actually getting a deal done in a holdout, basically in the middle of the season. And so, if they were this far apart on a deal, and Reddick was so like hell bent on holding out that he was not even playing, like holding out this far into the season, not even playing. Do you really think like he's been super invested in working his ass off on his own? Like maybe, but I wouldn't bet on it.
I mean, he
and so
threw
what,
millions of dollars down the drain.
right, and what version of him are you going to be getting? Like he doesn't give a shit that they're 2-5. He could care less. How much of an impact is that going to make? Like it just feels like they've got some issues right now, and I don't know that they're issues that a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to overcome. Because, I mean, I guess you can point to the fact that their division is Miami, New England, who's probably the worst team in the league, and themselves along with Buffalo. So I guess they're still probably like the team with the best chance to get this back to wild card contention over the next couple weeks, but I don't know if I see it because they're so banged up in the secondary. DJ Reed's been hurt. Sauce Gardner's gone in and out of games. Like they're just not the unit we thought they would be, and like they were dominated on both sides for 3 quarters on Sunday night. So I don't know. I think you could, at this point in the season, I think you kind of, I don't know how much is going to change. Like you can make marginal improvements here and there, obviously at the trade deadline, and maybe get a little better here and there on certain parts of your football team. But I think we have a big enough sample size now through 7 weeks that teams kind of are who they are at this point in the season. So it certainly hasn't gone the way a lot of people thought, in that most people thought the Jets would be in Super Bowl discussions. That's certainly not the case right now. But I'm interested to see, where it goes moving forward. Any other conversations that you want to have coming out of NFL Week 7? You want to kind of
Well,
preview
the
week 8?
NFC North is absolutely insane right now. I mean, you
Yes.
could argue all four teams belonged on this list.
Yep.
Like the
That's what I
Bears
said
were
last
sitting there
week.
on their bye week at 4-2. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
with Caleb Williams getting better by the day, and then of course the Vikings, Packers, and Lions are, you know, some of the best teams in the NFC. So that division is gonna be nuts to watch the rest of the year.
Yeah, I said last week that, and I don't know if it still stands as of this week, but coming out of last week, if you rank the top 4 teams in terms of point differential in the NFL, all 4 of them were the teams in that division. And they were all multiple games above 500. And up until this weekend, one of the teams was undefeated.
Yeah.
And they're not even the highest ranked team in either of our power rankings in their own division. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, you have them third in the division.
right, and they might be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's mighty impressive what the Vikings are doing. I think you can make an argument, for what they have as a coaching staff, it's one of the best in the NFL with the Brian Flores hire at defensive coordinator, the difference he's made for their defense, and what Kevin O'Connell has done with Sam Darnold. It's pretty impressive. And then you look at the Lions and the wagon that they are right now, and the Packers, who we both believe when it's all said and done will be right there in Super Bowl conversations. And then the Bears, like, they could absolutely make the wild card. So before we go out, do you want to do any state of the Cowboys stuff, or are you just not interested, or do you have anything to say about?
I mean, maybe for a couple minutes, but okay. Let's attack it from this angle. Let's play a quick game of, are they fired or no by the end of the year?
Okay.
Mike McCarthy, is he fired or no by the end of the year?
Ooh. I
His
don't know.
contract is up. Just keep that in mind.
I'm gonna say they won't renew him. I don't know if they will fire him, but I don't know if they'll renew him.
They'll move on. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think they'll give him. I think they'll give him the season. I don't think they'll fire him before that.
No.
All right, next one. Micah Parsons. Is he a Cowboy after this season?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm torn, man. We've kind of already made our bed in terms of paying Dak all that money and then paying CD all that money. Now, my thing is do we want the 3 highest paid players at their positions taking up, 3 players taking up like a fourth of our cap? Like, that seems ridiculous in a football context. Like, you're creating a 53-man roster, and you're putting a lot of your stock into 3 guys that could get hurt at any time. So,
Yeah.
I think Michael Parsons is an amazing player, and I think I would love for him to be a Cowboy his entire career. But with the decisions we've already made, we've made it a death trap, basically. And
I think it largely depends on which direction this season goes.
yeah, I think there's a small chance Micah Parsons is on the trading block, and I hate saying that, and some of y'all might think I'm crazy, but I genuinely believe that it will be like a Khalil Mack Raiders type situation.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any more fire or safe, or is that the game?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean,
Okay.
I guess you could throw Mike Zimmer in there, but if Mike McCarthy's gone, then he's gone too, in
Yeah.
theory. So,
Real
yeah,
fast
I
before
think
we
that's it.
before we before I know this is a long way down the road, but before we get out of here, uh, do you have any head coaching candidates right now that immediately come to mind as a Dallas Cowboy fan that you would be like interested in?
Brian Flores.
Brian Flores. Okay.
Brian Flores.
Okay.
Like
I like it.
Brian Flores, three exclamation points, Brian Flores.
Okay.
Um,
That's what I wanted to know.
I think he would be number one on my list with his track record and with the, with having Dak under contract. It's clear that our track to winning a Super Bowl with Dak is with a dominant defense. So I think a defensive coach is the easiest way to do that. So Brian Flores is my guy at the top of my list. Uh,
Okay. I like it.
Next, I mean, it's the typical cast of characters. I would say. I mean, Ben Johnson. You throw his name in there. I mean, who else? I mean,
I mean, after that, if you are Brian Flores, I don't know if it really matters the rest of the list. Now we'll see if
right,
that happens. I think Brian Flores deserves a head coaching job, no doubt about it. I think he'll get one, given what he's doing right now in Minnesota.
right.
Um, I like that. Um, okay, is that it for this week? Hope you guys enjoyed our NFL Power Rankings post Week 7. I don't know if we'll be doing this every week, but our plan at the very least is to do it after every other week of the NFL moving forward. So hopefully you guys enjoy not only our power rankings, let us know where you agree, where you disagree, and who you would have in place of some of our teams if you would make changes to our lists. Let us know where you have your team. And make sure you like and subscribe because we put out a lot of content, and there's a lot of content coming over the next couple weeks with the World Series, with the NBA starting, with college basketball starting, with we're in the middle of college football, we're in the middle of the NFL. There's a lot that goes on this channel, so we greatly appreciate if you would subscribe and engage in our comment section and on our social media. Any other parting shots before we get out of here?
Um, well, stay tuned for our World Series preview coming on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. And also stay tuned for college football content coming tomorrow and more college basketball content coming over the next couple weeks as we approach the start of that season as well. But I'm Michael Ween. He's Emmy Nixon. And we will see you next time on our NFL Weekly Recaps. Peace out.
Peace.
All right.